Hi everybody, it's Ryan from Ryviews.com, and I'm here doing Die for a Lie tips and tricks. This is a pretty straightforward game. You're shooting bad guys as they try to eat your cakes, but there are definitely a few nuances that can make progressing through the campaign much easier. So here we go. Tip number 1, you never want to stop firing. The pistol has unlimited ammo, so there's really never any reason to stop firing. You don't have to reload, you don't have to worry about anything overheating, it's just a solid weapon. If you constantly have your finger on the trigger, you can take out enemies before they even enter your screen. And even after you unlock some of the more powerful weapons, I thought it was still best to fire the pistol forever until they were actively eating the cake. Then I would usually switch to the options with more firepower. Along those lines, I'd recommend upgrading your pistol early in the game. You'll never want to stop using it, and those upgrades are your bread and butter. So you can't do anything without the pistol until late in the match, when you may or may not be able to scrape by with nothing but turrets. And I recommend upgrading turrets second anyway. Tip number 2 is conserve your other ammo. You want to keep firing your pistol all the time, which has unlimited ammo, but for your explosives, for your rifle, and for your shotgun, I think you should always conserve that ammo for as long as possible. I mentioned that in my video review, so you may recall I recommended that earlier. On the surface, it's a bit of a ripoff because you always start with a minimum of 30 shots, regardless of how many you used in the previous matches. And if you roll over anything over 30, then you don't get that 30 every time. So if you have 31 at the end of a match, you only get 31 next time. You don't get that free 30 every time. But since the rollover is a good way to strategize, you can build up hundreds and hundreds of ammo throughout the entire game if you're able to conserve. So it's actually usually a pretty good idea because some of those levels you don't need to use that ammo. It's better to roll it over. Basically, you should use your upgraded pistol and turrets as long as you can until you're losing the match, until you have to break out the heavy-duty weaponry to defend your cakes. And even then, sometimes I think it'd be better to grind an earlier level to accrue more ammo than it would be to just beat the level and move on. You want to only use ammo for emergencies. That way the later levels are much, much, much easier. If you waste too much of that ammo early on, you'll get to later levels and it'll be really difficult. You'll have to grind away, possibly at a slower grinding pace, because you'll have weaker weapons or weaker ammunition, and you'll barely be injuring the enemies, so it could be much more frustrating. Tip number 3 is the order of the upgrades. You have to make sure you pay attention to that. As I already mentioned, I think upgrading pistol is top priority, after that turrets. Afterwards, obviously, it gets a little more complicated, possibly more to your playstyle, but in general, I recommend forgetting about the other weapons and the explosives. Forget about anything on that page, go to the drop frequency and fury time. Those both have legitimately strong improvements. The Fury is obviously only good if you can reach the Fury point, so depending, that might need to be mixed in somewhere else. But once you're able to turn on Fury in the match, you really want to extend that for as long as possible. It's really a trump card. As far as health is concerned, there's no reason to upgrade that early on. The enemies don't attack you, so as long as you keep your distance, you'll almost never die, certainly early on. I got frustrated because I kind of hit a wall with the health around the middle of the game, but I'd still say that it's an upgrade that has very low priority. And the same with speed. So the pistol has 100% range. You don't need to move fast, really. You can fire across the map with no penalty. So I'd say, until you start using explosives, movement speed has very limited importance. I'd still put it above health, because if you can move faster, you can still see the problem. But in general, those two are still really low priority. And if you can pick up turret and ammo drops faster, that helps movement, but still, in general, it's not great. Those pickups don't disappear after a certain amount of time, so really, unless you actively need the upgrade, there's no real reason to pick up that faster. I'd probably recommend upgrading your other guns before really using much ammo, because you get more bang for your buck that way. And the same with explosives, you're upgrading the power, so you want to probably wait to use those and save them up until you have lots of firepower, because then it'll be worth more. But in general, that's kind of it's planning ahead for the future. It's not really a big deal. But it also means that if you're able to hold on to it, it's a very good payoff in the end. So yeah, on the second page, I think the most important one is definitely the drop rate. That will help you get more turrets, more health, more ammo to save up. I think that's the way to go. My last tip is turret placement. This is kind of a minor thing, depending on where you are in the game, but it can really help you down the road, and it can really help despite the fact that it may seem kind of stupid and it may look like it doesn't really matter. It really can have a huge effect on the later levels. So jumping between levels, you can kind of jump between heights, level 1, 2, 3 on the cakes. So that can take quite a bit of time. So it's best if you can put your turrets either on the top one or the bottom one, so that way you can focus on the other levels. And if you keep your turrets on the outer levels, that means there's fewer switches, So if you put it in the middle one, you still need to focus on 1 and 3, but then there's more switching. So you want to put it in either 1 or 3 and then focus on 2 and whichever one you didn't put turrets on. In general, just pick one, like you always put them on top or always put them on bottom, that we aren't confused. From there, I'd recommend placing probably 2 to 3 on one level. So that way it's self-sufficient, and then start putting it on other levels. That way you're able to completely just forget about that level in general. I think it's a good idea to load up at least 3 turrets on one level before you start stacking others. And then I would say from there you want to put it on, if you choose the bottom to begin with, choose the top, then keep that middle row for you. So that way you're moving a minimum distance every time. You also want to place turrets really close to your cakes. They have 100% range just like your pistol, and they can't shoot through enemies. So their auto-targeting system always tries to default to who's closest to the cake. But so if it's on one extreme, it'll only hit people walking towards the cake in the direction. You want to put it close to the cake, so that way it's actually shooting the people who are actually eating the cake. That has a big difference when there's a big swarm of enemies, trust me. So I think that's it for now. If you have any more tips and tricks, please post them in the comment section so you can help out everyone else playing. Thanks for watching, everybody. Visit www.ryviews.com for more content. Until next time.